Welcome to the WWE Podcast, your number one source for the latest in WWE news and straightforward analysis. Are you ready to get this thing going?
Give me a hell yeah! I said give me a hell yeah!
Then let's get this show started right now.
Hey guys, what's going on? And welcome back to WWE Rivalries on the WWE Podcast. It is Friday, February 5th, as we are inching closer to Elimination Chamber, which will be taking place in, I guess, just over 2 weeks' time. And I gotta say, the Elimination Chamber has always been one of my favorite matches. Not so much the pay-per-view. I've never been a huge fan of gimmick pay-per-views along with TLC and Hell in a Cell and whatnot. But I've always loved the chamber match, although they've kind of baby-proofed it in past years. Like the outside of the chamber is now like just a mat, as it used to be a steel grate, and even the glass that the pods are made out of, it feels like it's a different kind of plexiglass that's a lot more safe. And look, I understand that for the wrestlers and the performers, it is much easier on their bodies to, you know, take those bumps in a safer environment, but it does affect the product and the presentation a bit because it is so visibly less gruesome and painful. But at the end of the day, that's just me being selfish, and it is ultimately a good thing. And we're going to review a rivalry that is not talked about a whole lot today, and it is inspired about one of the returns, or inspired from one of the returns, rather, in this past year's Royal Rumble that took place just 4 days ago, or 5 days ago now, when Carlito came back. And we will be reviewing Carlito versus John Cena that took place in the fall of 2004. And it wasn't a big rivalry. It wasn't for a World Heavyweight Championship. It wasn't even in a main event. They never even had a one-on-one match at a pay-per-view, which is kind of odd considering the fact that it was, well, Carlito's initial rivalry in WWE, and I'll get to it later on, but he actually won the championship in his first ever match and appearance on live television. And then it was one of the main feuds, I think, that highlighted John Cena's run in the upper mid-card when he was very entrenched in the United States Championship scene. So it was I think a lot of things had to do with it. A real-life injury to Carlito was one of the main factors. But I still think this program was very important for both careers, and we'll get to that in just a bit. But before we get to it, I want to talk about the Royal Rumble and my thoughts on what transpired this past Sunday night. And I gotta say, if you go back to my predictions last week, I got everything right. And I knew exactly what was coming, and I'm just kidding. I got almost everything wrong. But to be fair, I said at the end of my show last week that I was hoping that I would be wrong about most of my predictions, and I was wrong about most of my predictions, and therefore I am a happy guy today. I was, for the most part, pleased with the Royal Rumble. There were some things I wasn't a fan of, but let's start with the positive things. Number one, Drew McIntyre beats Goldberg. Thank God. Thank God Drew McIntyre beat Goldberg, and we did not have to sit through another lackluster run of Goldberg as a world champion in WWE 10 to 15 years past his prime. And I gotta say, I wasn't a fan of the match. I'm not a big fan of Goldberg matches, and although I am happy that Drew won the championship, I said this a few weeks back, and I'll say it again, I just don't get the point of this match. You know, at the end of the match, it was almost like they tried to recreate a Rock Hogan or Cena Rock moment of like the old dog finally passing the torch. And like I saw Goldberg saying to him, like, "You passed, man. You passed the test." And in my head, I'm just like, who the bleep are you, Goldberg? Like, you're supposed to be the guy passing the torch to Drew McIntyre? Goldberg is the one that's supposed to do this. Like, you know what? If, let's say, the next time John Cena has the time to fully commit to, let's say, a 2-3 month long program, I would love to see a Drew McIntyre versus John Cena program where it is something to this effect, where John Cena is passing the torch to Drew McIntyre as the top babyface in the company. Kind of like what The Rock did with Cena and like what Hogan did with Rock. You know, that kind of thing that they were so desperately trying to go for with a Goldberg to Drew. But Goldberg has no business being that guy. And I'm not talking about Goldberg directly or personally. Obviously, he's just doing what he's told and collecting a check and probably being paid quite handsomely for that. But I'm talking to Creative and Vince. Why is Goldberg the guy for you guys that is passing the torch to Drew as the next big-time babyface in the company? Like, that's just inexcusable. Like, let's actually look at this objectively here. I don't care what Goldberg did in WCW because WCW was its own separate company. It was its own separate entity. And obviously, since the doors closed and Vince bought it in real life in early 2001, we've seen a ton of crossover. The NWO came over, Goldberg came over, Sting came over, Scott Steiner came over. But at the end of the day, who do we think of guys on Mount Rushmore for WWE? It's guys who were stars in WWE. As they say, it is the A promotion. It is the promotion in professional wrestling or sports entertainment, however you want to phrase it. Hogan, while he did have a great run in WCW, he made his name in the WWF in the late 80s and early 90s. Stone Cold Steve Austin, WWF guy. Rock, WWF guy. John Cena, WWE guy. It's all consistent here. It's guys that made their name in the company that ran the other one out of business. So yes, Goldberg did transition over to WWE. But let's look at this now. He spent 1 year in WWE in his quote-unquote prime. He was in from April 2003 until March 2004. And to be honest, it was a good run. To be honest, I really did like the run that Goldberg had. I watched Survivor Series 2003 last week, and I gotta say, I really did enjoy Goldberg back then. But you know what? He's old now, and I don't want to see it anymore. And even though I enjoyed him back then, he was never once on the level of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Never once on the level of Shawn Michaels, The Rock, John Cena. He's not on the level of those guys. He's a one-trick pony, and while back in the day he was damn good at that trick, he's not that anymore. And it just bothered me to no end to see him acting as if it was his right and his responsibility to tell Drew that he passed the test. Excuse me, Goldberg, take a back seat, take a lap, whatever you want to do, just don't do that ever again. You don't deserve that. You've done nothing in WWE to warrant you being the one to tell Drew that he has to pass a test and he doesn't have respect. And again, I'm talking about the character here. Obviously, the man is not like that. By all accounts, he's a great guy. But the writers, like, my God, get a clue. Like, are we supposed, like, it's just another case of WWE insulting our intelligence here. Because Goldberg has never once been that guy. He was never once the face of the company. And they're building Drew as one of the faces of the company. Okay, yes, you can make the case that Roman Reigns is that guy, but Drew's the babyface. And obviously the babyface champions are always the one that will be pushed a little bit harder. Like, it's just normal. You know, Hogan and Austin and Rock. Like, that's one of the reasons why I don't think Triple H was ever quite in that league with the aforementioned guys. Because he made his name as a heel. And while big-time heels like Orton, like Ric Flair, like Triple H, are just as important to the company as the babyfaces, if not more important, the faces of the company are typically the babyfaces, and it's normal. Goldberg was never once the face of the company, because even when he was in WWE in 2003 as one of the big-time baby faces, like, I would argue that Shawn Michaels was a bigger baby face than him, but just didn't want the strap on him. That was just the beginning of Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit's ascent to the top of the card. Kurt Angle was a baby face for much of 2003. So look, I really did not like that. But aside from that, really happy that Drew won, and thankfully he never has to come into contact, or anyone else on the roster for that matter, never has to come into contact with Goldberg again. As for the Women's Tag Team Championships. One of the few matches that I was right on in my predictions. Happy that Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax got the Women's Tag Team Championships back. They could put them back on a more relevant path, and we can move on from there as Charlotte Flair is obviously on a collision course with Lacey Evans. The Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens match, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well done. I thought the finish was a bit of, what's the word I'm looking for, anticlimactic. But, you know, the guillotine, really, like, he beat him with a submission in a last man standing match, like, okay. But aside from that, I really liked it. Obviously, the botch with the handcuffs was just brutal, but that's, you know, it's nobody's fault. It was, they got jammed or whatever the hell happened. But look, it was, aside from the handcuffs and the finish that I wasn't a huge fan of, I really liked it. I think all men, like, left it all out there. I thought they protected Kevin Owens real well. I thought they made Roman Reigns look as ruthless as he could have been, attacking the ref and all that. So, really enjoyed that match as well. Sasha Banks and Carmella. Well, look, I'm really not enjoying Sasha Banks right now. I gotta say, like, you know, when someone loves their own theme song as much as Sasha Banks, like, it is just an insta-heel turn for me. Like, you know, like, she times her little dance moves for when it's like, dun, 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 and I'm just like, oh, come on. Like, they did it also with Baron Corbin, too, that, like, he had a really cool theme song at the beginning when he first came into WWE, or came up from the main roster from NXT, rather. And then as soon as he got a bit of traction by the summer of 2017, right around the time he won the Money in the Bank, he changed his theme song to the one he has now. And you just saw how much he loved his own theme song. And I was just so turned off by it. Like, come on. Like I'm not saying that you have to hate your own theme song, but don't make it so obvious. And Sasha Banks, like, she's mouthing the words on the way to the ring. And she's supposed to be a babyface. And it's just so unlikable. It's so unlikable. Like, what is that? Come on. Like, I should not be cheering for Carmella, but I am. I'm just cheering for anyone but Sasha Banks. And I used to love Sasha Banks, but the theme song thing and the way she acts, and it's just, oh, I'm just so not a fan that she's a babyface. And, like, I guess if she was a heel, they would be doing the job especially well, but, like, as a babyface, like, oh my god, like, get over yourself. Get over your theme song. Like, we get it. Your cousin Snoop Dogg, and you have some attachment to the rapping. Okay, fine, but move on. Like, try and make it at least a bit more subtle. It's like it's part of her entrance now. Like, it's a part of the scripted entrance to the ring that she's gonna dance to, like, the drop of the beat, and then she's gonna mouth the words on the apron that Snoop Dogg's rapping in the song. And anyway, she keeps the belt, unfortunately. I'm really over this babyface run in Sasha Banks. And it's not to her work in the ring. You can make the argument that aside from Charlotte Flair, she's the best female worker in the company right now. But I just really am not a fan of the babyface character of Sasha Banks. Moving on to the Women's Royal Rumble match. And you know what? Probably the most deserving winner that WWE could have picked. I thought it was fairly obvious. I thought that Bianca Belair was going to win for quite a while now, ever since she came up to the main roster of SmackDown. Or when she got drafted over to SmackDown, they started pushing her at the top of the card. And then in the 11th hour, I decided to go with Lana because I didn't have faith in WWE to do what was right. And I thought they would have done something that to kind of swerve us, and B, because they had been pushing Lana so hard in early December. But you know what? That was my bad, and WWE did what they should have done, and they pushed the right person, and this is a star in the making. Bianca Belair is going to be the face of the women's division for a long, long time. And I'm not usually a fan of someone being pushed so hard and so early, but when you're as good as Bianca Belair, and, you know, it just in everything, like, okay, maybe her promo needs a bit more work, but she knows her character, and it's a character that could very easily feel heelish with the kind of being obnoxious, and I'm the EST, but she walks such a fine line of being confident but not branching over to cocky that she's just become very, very likable. And I have to say, like, I think she has the potential to supersede even Charlotte. Like, she is that good, and I think that she knows how to be a babyface. And like I said earlier, if you know how to get over as a babyface, you will always be a little bit above the top heel. And for me, Charlotte, although I still do think she's the best in the company, that she is more over as a heel. She feels very unnatural as a babyface. So if Bianca Belair could maintain the level that she's at right now and go into WrestleMania, win the women's championship, whether it be on Raw or on SmackDown, and just maintain how over she is and keep walking that fine line of being oh so confident but not cocky in a heelish type of way, the sky's the limit. And to be honest, I think that they've lacked a true babyface main event women's champion for a while. And look, you could point to Asuka, but unfortunately, and it's through no fault of her own, a lot of this lies at the feet of creative. But Asuka, for me, it's kind of fallen flat because I think there is that language barrier. I do think that WWE doesn't, or Vince in particular, doesn't view her as in the same caliber as they viewed, let's say, Becky Lynch or Charlotte. And that's indicative of how they've used her and the writing and the Raw Women's Championship really being an afterthought in recent months. So I think she could pass Asuka. Becky Lynch, I know she was as over as ever, but from a personal perspective, I despised Becky Lynch. I hated the man gimmick. And you know what? That's a good example. Speaking of crossing the line of confident to cocky, that's what Becky Lynch did. She ran past the line. Like, she was so far past the line that she couldn't even see it anymore. She was so cocky in a heelish type of way with a leather jacket, driving in with a semi truck, like, you know, stealing, trying to like play off of Stone Cold Steve Austin, that I was just like, no, this is a heel now. Like, you're an unlikable heel. But WWE continued to push her as a babyface until the day that she relinquished the championship and went on maternity leave. That, I don't know, I really did not like Becky Lynch. And I felt that right before the COVID hit, I felt like the crowd was maybe starting to cool off on her a bit. I feel like, especially when she embarked on that program with Shayna Baszler, there was kind of a turn of the tide. And winds have changed in terms of how the audience viewed Becky Lynch, but not because of that, maybe just because she was growing stale. But for me, as soon as she started the man gimmick, and I just remember her coming out live, I was at a show in Montreal when she had the Raw and SmackDown Women's Champions, and she's like, I'm the champ, I'm the champ, Becky Two Belts, I'm the man, I'm the champ. And I was just like, oh, come on, get the F out of here, you know? And I was just really dislikable. And to go back to Bianca Belair, well, you know, she's walking that line, and as long as she doesn't cross it and supersede it like Becky Lynch did, I really have confidence for where Bianca Belair, easy enough for me to say, can take this company and where she can be as a main babyface for SmackDown or for Raw, and I'm sure she'll eventually make her way back to Raw, especially if she does go on an astronomical run here, because as we know, WWE typically, my God, can't speak today, guys, typically likes to get their main event stars over to Raw at some one point or another. Over on the men's Royal Rumble, I initially liked this. I thought it was cool that Edge won the Royal Rumble. Only the third person to win it after being the number one entry, along with Chris Benoit and Shawn Michaels. It was a safe pick, that's for sure. I don't think anyone could be thoroughly upset about this. But after I had some time to think about it, and I saw Edge come out on Raw, and not for anything, but I feel like he aged like 50 years in the last 6 months since he's been away. And that's no one's fault. Like, Father's Time is undefeated in every single bout. But I don't know. The more I've had time to think about this, the more I don't like it. Because where are you going to go with it? Like, quite literally, what are you going to do? Okay, so you're going to do Drew versus Edge, and he's going to be yet another quote-unquote legend or Hall of Famer? Okay. If you go against Roman versus Edge, I mean, if they go down that road, I think that it's a slam dunk that Roman wins, because I think that when Roman finally does drop the Universal belt, it will have to be a big deal and to the right opponent, and I really don't think that Edge is that guy. And then let's assume that it is him versus Drew, which if I was a betting man, I would bank on that. And Sheamus is just that stopgap rivalry to Drew between now and WrestleMania. Okay, so Edge could win the WWE Championship. There's that possibility. But then if Roman beats him, he just beats another legend, like I just said. I don't get it. I thought that they could have picked a better guy to win this. You know, I know that I picked Drew to enter the Royal Rumble and win for the second time because I thought he was going to drop the belt to Goldberg. And I guess after Edge, it was hard to really advocate for anyone to legitimately win it. I know that Daniel Bryan was the favorite going in, but I really think that Daniel Bryan has cooled off in a major way over the last year or so. So maybe Edge was the right guy. Like off the top of my head, I can distinctively pick a guy without a doubt and say he would have been a better option than Edge. So for all I know, maybe Edge was the best guy. And like I said before, it is 100% a safe pick. And while I don't hate it, I just think that it's kind of underwhelming. And it's probably especially large part due to the fact that the last 3 Royal Rumble winners have been really, really good winners. Like, you know, you had Drew last year, Seth Rollins before that, Shinsuke Nakamura the year before that. And even the year before that, you had Randy Orton winning it. So maybe it's just because of that, because of how strong the Royal Rumble has been in the past couple of years and how great the winners have been. But for whatever reason, I felt a bit underwhelmed with Edge winning the championship or the Royal Rumble to face the champion of his choosing come WrestleMania. But I'll give it some time to marinate a bit, and maybe WWE will prove me wrong. Like I said, it was a safe pick, and while it wasn't the worst in the world, I just was kind of hoping for something different. But enough about that, and let's get into Carlito versus John Cena from their feud in 2004. And I'll give you just a bit of a backstory here. 2004 was the breakout party for John Cena. This was the year that he really skyrocketed into the hearts of the WWE fans and into probably into the heart of Vince McMahon and creative, because he went from, let's say, in mid 2003, like an undercard heel, to a upper mid-card babyface champion, as he won the United States Championship, his first ever title, at WrestleMania 20 when he beat The Big Show at Madison Square Garden. Following WrestleMania 20, WWE really shook up the mid-card of SmackDown. They had a draft, and they sent guys like Rene Dupree, who disbanded from La Resistance, RVD, and Booker T over to SmackDown. And this really kind of strengthened that mid-card, because before that, it was really kind of like Big Show, Eddie Guerrero, and Chris Benoit, who were really featured in that United States Championship picture. But here's the thing. Big Show, he had the run with the U.S. title for the better part of 6 months, so he was off doing something else. I think he took a bit of time off and then came back repackaged as a babyface, to be honest, following WrestleMania 20. Chris Benoit was over on Monday Night Raw as the World Heavyweight Champion. Eddie Guerrero had won the WWE Championship and now was in the main card. Or in the main event rather, and at this point, Kurt Angle was the SmackDown GM while nursing a real-life injury. So, look, WWE really need to shake things up and bolster that mid-card for SmackDown, and especially another thing was the departure of Brock Lesnar. So SmackDown was really in a time of transition here, and they sent over guys, like I said, like Booker T, RVD, and Dupree to go over and help John Cena really be the faces of that mid-card. And this led to a best-of-5 series with Booker T for the United States Championship. And this was another another rivalry I debated doing instead of Carlito versus John Cena, because this one really kind of made John Cena. It's kicked off at SummerSlam 2004, and it concluded at No Mercy 2004. And Booker T actually won the belt from John Cena, won the United States Championship from John Cena. And this was like the first actual rivalry that John Cena had, was with Booker T. And it was big for him because Booker T had just turned heel after being drafted over to SmackDown after a babyface run for quite a while on Monday Night Raw. He was actually the tag team champions with Rob Van Dam, a very underrated tag team, RVD and Booker T. But once they had gotten drafted over to SmackDown, they disbanded, and Booker T went on a run as a heel. And over this best of 5 series, which John Cena ended up winning, that concluded at No Mercy and taking back the United States Championship, Booker T really put John Cena over as a legitimate guy. And I think that beating a guy with a pedigree like Booker T, you know, as we all know, a 5-time WCW champion, and at this point really kind of trending towards a legacy star. He had been in WWE for 3 years at this point, and he had gotten over with the fans as a babyface over on Monday Night Raw in 2003. And I think it was just the perfect foe for John Cena to legitimately get over as a babyface. But then comes the SmackDown after No Mercy, and John Cena finds himself defending the United States Championship against a debuting Carlito Caribbean Cool. As yes, that was his name at the time, Carlito Caribbean Cool. And just this average looking guy with an afro, and I didn't know who he was, and I don't think a lot of people knew who he was, and everyone just assumed that it was going to be a notch in the belt for John Cena, further legitimizing him as the United States champion, until we saw what happened in the match.
Being off the rope, takes out Carlito. Hook the leg, shoots down, kick out for the challenger. Quick, close stuff there, man. Cena thought he had Carlito. Puts him across the ring into the corner. Watch out, watch out, watch out! Bulldog face first. Cena now got Carlito right where he wants him. Taking that hand, you know what's coming, Cole. Wherever you can't see me. Now off the ropes. Time for a little 5-knuckle. Shaking off the shoulder. Shuffle. Right hand connecting. Carlito's down and out. Here's the hook to the leg. Almost had him 2.5 again. And again, this Carlito ever resilient in this match. Wow. Very impressed with Carlito, but Cena, the doctor, is pumping it up. John Cena in a zone, stalking, measuring his man. Carlito doesn't know where he is. Carlito hanging on to the top rope desperately. John Cena trying to connect here. As long as Carlito hangs on, look at this. Oh, I thought he was going to dump him. And that's Carlito off the apron into the steps. I'll tell you what, that was smart by the referee. That was smart by John.
So by this point in the match, it seems all but certain that John Cena is going to take care of Carlito quite handedly. You know, it was all John Cena, Carlito holding on for dear life, and at this point he knocks him out of the ring as he avoids the AA, or as it was known back then, the FU, and John Cena almost like laughing about how easy it is for him, and the ref backs him off to give Carlito a hand. So they're really telling a story that this is almost child's play for John Cena, and that's what we should have been led to believe. You know, he had just beat a Hall of Famer in the making like Booker T in a best of 5 series to win back the United States Championship. But as the match kept on playing out, it didn't seem like things were going to be just as easy as we thought for John Cena.
The referee preventing John Cena from going back out in the ring. Carlito just grabbed the United States Championship. Where's he going? He's just stealing it? Carlito's got the United States gold and he's bringing it into the ring. Now a right hand by John Cena. Carlito in trouble in the corner. John Cena grabbing the title. Be careful, referee Brian Hebner trying to take it. Oh, John Cena with that gold in his hand, and the referee desperately trying to prevent Cena from using that championship. And John Cena will use it. Wait a minute. Carlito's got that's that steel chain Cena carries around. Wait a minute. Carlito's got the steel chain. Cena has no idea. Right off the skull. straight right hand. The referee never saw it. And now look at Carlito, the new United States champion. Carlito's telling the referee, put that championship around my waist. Carlito's insisting that the referee wraps that championship around his waist. Look at this. The Fleet Center in Boston is in shock.
So Carlito, against all odds, beats John Cena by nailing him in the head with John Cena's own steel chain while the referee was distracted, putting the United States Championship out of the ring. And at this time, when John Cena was the doctor of thugonomics, he carried around like this steel chain with like a padlock around it, and he'd wear it around his neck. It was very, very bizarre, but I mean, it went with the character at that time, and a character that I wish would have kind of been rebooted at some point. And we saw it a bit at WrestleMania 35 when he came out to confront Elias, which was cool, but just a completely different character that we became accustomed to with John Cena in the later years, especially when we surpassed the year 2007, 2008. So Carlito wins the United States Championship in his first night on SmackDown, and just a complete shock as they're really pushing this guy to the moon here. And this kind of led to a weird storyline where we found out that John Cena had been stabbed in a nightclub. And this was later that month in October. And it was later revealed that we were led to believe, rather, that it was at the hands of Carlito and his henchmen that we came to know as Jesus. So Carlito takes the championship away from John Cena, and in his first night on SmackDown by cheating to win, and then we're led to believe that he stabbed John Cena in a nightclub, which put John Cena on the sidelines for just over a month. But heading into Survivor Series, we kind of saw this rivalry start to come to a head here. And it all kind of began to culminate, because it wasn't quite the culmination of it, but we really saw John Cena start to seek retribution, no pun intended, at the Survivor Series in the 4-on-4 traditional elimination match between Team Eddie Guerrero and Team Kurt Angle. And Team Eddie Guerrero consisted of Rob Van Dam, obviously Kurt Angle, Big Show, and a returning John Cena against Team Kurt Angle, which was Kurt Angle, Mark Jindrak, Luther Reigns, and Carlito. And we had not seen John Cena since he had been allegedly stabbed in a nightclub, just probably about almost 2 or 3 weeks at this point. And we weren't sure if John Cena was going to show up, and what would he do if he did show up? What would he be capable of doing after being stabbed? Well, we got that answer at the beginning of the match.
And their partner from West Newbury, Massachusetts, weighing in at 248 pounds, John Cena looks like he is all about business. He will not take your stare. Here we go. John Cena. Jesus. The fight has begun outside the ring. John Cena. Well, Jesus. What an interference for Carlito. And John Cena is firing off those long rounds all over. Jesus. This is what it's all about for John Cena. He cannot wait to get his hands on the two-man war in that club the night Cena was stabbed in the kidney. Cena trying to get to Carlito, and he just might be able to do it here. John Cena in hot pursuit. He is waiting for this night. Where are you going, Cole? What the heck? We're heading to the backstage area here at the Gund Arena. Jesus stepping into that steel. John Cena's been waiting and waiting and waiting. And good God, man, he has got his sights set on where we now. What's going on? Oh, this is back in the locker room area. I'll tell you one thing. Carlito Taz seems like John Cena and Jesus from behind. This is a fight, Cole. Headbutt. Yeah, this is a fight that Carlito wants nothing of. Carlito is running away from Cena. You want to get at me? Straight up street fight, Cole. Send your boy for me. Maybe this is what happened at that After Hours club. What are we talking about here? You can't get this guy. You can't come up to that guy. You can't come up to that guy. Jesus from behind again. Carlito's associate. I'll tell you, John Cena, it's like 2-on-1 here. Well, actually 1-on-1 because Carlito keeps running.
Well, Carlito and Jesus.
What? Let's just call it. They're trying to find a car that's open and... Well, Carlito getting into the driver's side of that car. She just jerked the woman out of the car. Somebody was in there. What the heck? John Cena desperately trying to get into that car. And Carlito, man, Jesus speeding away. What the heck?
So John Cena, before the match even starts, comes to the ring and just chases Carlito and Jesus out of the building, quite literally. And they really booked Carlito as a true slimy heel, because during this whole melee that went all the way to the back parking garage, John Cena did not get his hands on Carlito once. So they left the crowd desiring to see John Cena beat the hell out of Carlito, and all he did was destroy Carlito's henchman, Jesus. And so, not that it needs to be said, but Kurt Angle's team was down a man from the get-go because Carlito quite literally drove out of the arena and, for all intents and purposes, eliminated himself. And Team Guerrero ended up just completely flattening Team Angle with quite ease in the aftermath of this, as John Cena went back to the ring to join his team. So this ultimately led to a match between John Cena and Carlito for the United States Championship, where John Cena would look to finally gain back the United States Championship he had lost a month and a half prior.
Town. Here we go. No way. Look at this. Cena covers, hooks the line. Look at this. Cena got it. Cena wins the United States Championship in their record time.
Here's your winner and the new United States champion, John Cena.
John Cena has done it. He has regained the United States Championship that Carlito stole from him back on October 7th.
So John Cena beats him, and you may think, oh, that's a short audio clip, especially for you, because you know me, I like to play extended audio clips, but he squashed Carlito. He absolutely destroyed Carlito in, as Michael Cole record time, mocked him with the apple, hit him with the FU, now known as the AA, and won back the United States Championship. And I think why this rivalry concluded so fast was because of a real-life injury to Carlito. And if memory serves me correctly, he was on the shelf up and almost until the following summer, because I remember he was involved in a segment with Roddy Piper and Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania, and they had this program, or this storyline rather, going around where he would walk around the locker room and try and get superstars to sign a petition to get Teddy Long fired as the SmackDown general manager. So he did have a real-life injury, and I'm sure that played into this in some part. But John Cena actually ended up having a street fight versus Carlito's henchman, Jesus, for the United States Championship at Armageddon, which was the following pay-per-view, which John Cena won handedly, which kind of put this storyline to bed. And, you know, this was a short storyline. It didn't last too long. And it really isn't talked about, and you guys may be asking, like I brought up early in the show, like, why would you cover a storyline, or a rivalry rather, that didn't even involve a one-on-one match between either competitor at a pay-per-view? And it's simply this. They killed two birds with one stone. For one, they realized for certain that John Cena was over with the crowd. That much was 100% true following his return at Survivor Series and when he won back the United States Championship at the following SmackDown. And the crowd were fully behind John Cena and wanted him to be the face of SmackDown and the top babyface in the company. And, you know, in the succeeding couple of months, he was the runner-up in the Royal Rumble. He became the number one contender for the WWE Championship, won the WWE Championship against John Bradshaw Layfield, and the rest really is history, as we know what happened the following 10, 11 years for John Cena. But at the same time, they also created a mid-card heel in Carlito who had a pretty successful run in WWE up until, I guess, he left in 2010, I want to say. And like I said, by the time he left, I was really not watching wrestling a whole lot. But I remember him in 05 and 06 and even 07, and he was a very formidable mid-card heel. And especially when he went over to Monday Night Raw. Because like I said, the injury for him on SmackDown kind of derailed his career right out of the gate. But they kept him on television. And that was really smart. Because him going around with the petition to get Teddy Long fired, and then they put him in that segment with Austin and Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 21, it kept him relevant, and you really found out that he was a guy who got real heel heat, and he was good at it. Like, Carlito is a really good heel. I know he turned babyface, I want to say in 2007. I feel like he tagged with Ric Flair for a bit, but this guy's meant to be a heel. He really is meant to be a heel. He's funny. He has a good sense for comedy. Obviously, the apple thing that he would chew it up and spit in people's face. I remember there was this segment, I believe at the Royal Rumble in 05, where he was about to spit in Batista's face, who was a Raw competitor at the time, for not signing the petition to get Teddy Long fired. And he starts chewing the apple to spit in Batista's face, and Batista just death stares him, and he just so like sheepishly swallows the apple and walks away. But by the time he came back from injury and they sent him over to Monday Night Raw, in his first night on Monday Night Raw, he wins the Intercontinental Championship against Shelton Benjamin. And he kind of continued that whole, winning the mid-card championship on whatever show he's on by hook or crook over on Monday Night Raw. And he had a really good run over on Monday Night Raw in mid-2005 for that spilled all the way into 2006. He was on Team Monday Night Raw in the initial Raw versus SmackDown Survivor Series match that I covered a couple months back at this point. And he had a pretty good run on as a tag team with Chris Masters. Kind of disappointed they never won the tag team championships. I thought that was a cool tag team that they threw together. He was in an Elimination Chamber match at New Year's Resolution in 06 with Masters, Cena, Angle, HBK, and Kane. So, and this all really started from how good he was in his initial run as the U.S. champion, as a heel against John Cena. So while it isn't a very significant storyline in terms of match quality, or matches in general, rather, I thought that it was just a very subtle storyline that did a lot for either competitor and set themselves up for each of their runs with the company. And obviously, Carlito just went on to become a mid-card wrestler and eventually a tag team competitor, while John Cena became one of the biggest stars the industry has ever seen. So obviously their trajectories were a bit different, but in saying that, they both did their job, and I think it's a rivalry that isn't really talked about enough. And it really, Carlito's return at the Royal Rumble really made me think about this, and I thought I kind of owed it to you guys to give a backstory for Carlito and how he started out with the company 17 years ago, or 16 years ago. My math isn't very good. But anyway, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this rivalry. Be sure to get me on Twitter at ADemarco25. You can email Matt at realwwepodcast@gmail.com, or get him on Twitter at wrestling_audio. And as always, stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you next week.